We're thrilled to welcome Francisco Dopazo, General Partner at Humboldt Fund, to the show today. Francisco, thank you once again for joining us.
Thank you, Chris. Great being here. Amazing stuff you're building.
Let's kick things off. Francisco, can you share a brief personal intro with us?
Definitely. So, as I said, I'm originally from Venezuela, which is a little bit weird, especially in this industry. I was born and raised there. After a couple of years, of course, in high school, I decided to study engineer. So I have that engineering background, but only for 5 years, which is how long this career takes. And then I quickly moved to what a lot of people call the dark side. I did consulting for a couple of years. I was working for a US-based company, but focused mainly in Central America and the Caribbean. And after that, due to some socioeconomic issues in my home country, which I don't think I have to get into, I moved to the US. I did my MBA at MIT Sloan, and I spent maybe the 2 best years of my life. It was a great combination of learning and also meeting amazing people. And after MIT, where I did that MBA, focused on finance, venture, and real estate, I moved again to maybe again the dark side. I went to JPMorgan. I spent almost 5 years there, where I was on the asset management side, covering Latin American groups. I learned mostly related to transactions and structuring, investing, equity, debt, swaps, cross-currency swaps, real estate. It was quite interesting kind of experience because it allows you to look through different technology and industry lenses. And then later I spent a couple of years in real estate, first with WeWork and then with Tishman Speyer, always focus on transactions, always focus on the finance strategy side. And then during my, after real estate, I kept in touch with Benjamin Quiroga, who's one of the partners and also founders of Humboldt Fund, when I was at JPMorgan, and we started to discuss different investment ideas together with also Sebastian, who's the other partner, and we decided to put together this amazing firm called Humboldt Fund. So that's a quick personal intro.
Thank you for that. And at the same time, I know you talked about it being the dark side, but I hear they have cookies. So I'm excited to dive into that further in a moment. But before we do dive deeper, we'd also love to hear a little bit more about the Humboldt Fund, if you wouldn't mind.
Yes. So look, very simple. We're a venture capital firm, biotech in bio. We're focused on companies, people building mainly biology-driven platform technologies. Okay. So it's very broad, but we can get a little bit into the details later. Basically, the thesis or the overall thesis is investing in these companies that will be able to accelerate the process from learning, okay, from observation to knowledge, and then from knowledge to an actual solution extremely quickly. Similar things happen. For example, I think we discussed this when we met, right? How chemistry, physics, and other sciences initially were very, very artisanal to get from one point to the other. And then with the advancements of technology, new frameworks, all that stuff, those sciences were able to translate from observations to actual problem solving or engineering pretty quickly. And a similar thing is happening with biology over the past maybe 20, 30, 40 years. And that's something that we really want to play. And we don't want to be focused on a specific area or indication or use. Okay, we're kind of industry agnostics. So even though we say yes, we are a venture capital biotech firm, what we really care is about the underlying technology and how that technology can go to pharma, can have cosmetics applications, can have biomanufacturing applications. So we're very broad from that perspective. Now, in terms of what specific core or vertical technologies we're investing within that biology side are mainly gene editing, biomanufacturing, and biomanufacturing, I mean, being able to synthesize any biological elements from highly complex metabolites to proteins. The third component is stem cells, iPSCs, and finally microbiome companies. So those are kind of the 4 pillars. And again, we're agnostic in terms of the initial application of those platforms. And pretty quickly, which I think I forgot initially, we're based in the US, just making sure. And also we invest, generally our sweet spot is our companies raising their pre-seed to Series A. And also generally we invest in the US. We don't have any specific kind of mandate, geographical mandate, but we have been seen in the past, over the past years, is that the US is, in our opinion, by far the most interesting market to invest, given the whole ecosystem, entrepreneurs, not only the entrepreneurs, the investors, even the infrastructure that there is in order to build a company from scratch and get it to the market. And finally, I think also mentioned early in the introduction, we're a small firm. We're only 3 partners. So Benjamin Quiroga is the other partner. He's based in London. Originally from Chile. He also has a similar educational background to me in that he's more on the business side. But after he did business, he quickly shifted to be involved in several different industries, agriculture, financial services, biotech, all this interesting different sectors. But also he was he's a very deep kind of guy in that he likes to get a lot into the knowledge of what he's investing in. So he's really a deep tech kind of personality. And then the other partner, Sebastian, he's also from Chile, but he's the scientist of the group. He's the kind of the PhD. He got his PhD at UCSF, where he worked closely with Peter Walter, protein folding and protein homeostasis. And he later was also, he was not only a very smart and prolific academic, but also a business guy, right? After he graduated, he also participated in several different startups. One of those startups was Medivation. This is a startup that was later sold to Pfizer. I believe that was 2016, 2015 for $14 billion. And Sebastian was involved pretty early. I think he was employee 8 or 10 or something like that. And he took, he participated in the company since, it was just a paper, and they took that paper, to the market. So quite interesting kind of story. Yeah, so that's mainly Humboldt.
And a very thorough overview. Thank you. If anything, I'd love to ask, and we could always dive back into this later, but how did the 3 of you come together to launch the firm?
Yeah, that's a good point. Look, Benjamin did the connection. He was the kind of the guy playing the chess on that one. So just on the Sebastian side, so his family, Benjamin's family, also himself, they already invested together a couple of years ago. I would say like 5-6 years ago, in a couple of companies. One of those companies, in fact, is Metagenomic, which is one of the most interesting companies we have right now. So they already knew each other. They did investments of course on the biotech side. So he already knew kind of how good Sebastian was, not only from, again, a scientific perspective, but also from a business perspective. He's not a traditional, I would say, academic. He really had this incentive to get into also the business and investment side. And on the other side, I met Benjamin, as I said before, JPMorgan, always focused on, finance and analysis and research, all those things. And we got along pretty well because we had similar ideas on how to invest. It was not investing just by thinking it's a cool idea. We actually did the work. We really dialed into a specific trends, value those trends. So for example, if we at one point we were checking much before, like just after we met, we started to think about trend investing related to blockchain, space exploration, all these kind of trends. And we did the actual work of going, okay, how large this is, how many people you can touch with this, how long it will take, what resources do you need? By resources, I mean capital, but also I mean talent and people. And by doing those kind of analysis, he was like, okay, I have a good combination here. And he realized, look, I have kind of the scientific knowledge on one side. He has a good biotech experience on one side. On the other side, I have kind of a more down-to-earth, agnostic kind of investor. So he basically, he put the whole thing together, and that's how, we came up with this fun idea.
And it's been moving and grooving ever since. I love that. So
yeah.
let's take it a step back then and talk a little bit more about your own background, your own journey to venture capital, now that we have that context with the firm. So as you described, you completed your undergraduate degree in engineering in Venezuela, and from there you pursued a career in consulting, finance, including touching on real estate. Can you share more about your motivations at this early stage of your career? I'd love to just learn a little bit more about what guided your background.
Definitely, definitely. And I think you also, at one point, you should share also with the audience yours. I think it was a pretty compelling from every perspective. Look, a lot of context on my side, like four things maybe really influence why I was moving to certain spots. Okay, the first one is pure context, right? When I was in Venezuela, you don't have maybe a lot of options to study. Like if, for example, you're good with numbers or you like numbers, like kind of what people tell you and what, professors and your own family incentivize you to do is to study engineering. Okay, as simple as that. Like, okay, you're good with math, so you don't have a lot of options. It's a lot about the context that you have. The second component is learning. Like I really, that's one of the passions that I have, and I think that's what has been moving me over the past maybe 10, 15 years from a career perspective. Instead of following the money, the capital, it was following the people and new concepts and new learnings. And the other thing is optionality. I would really always want to keep my options open, like in terms of industries, so engineering was a little bit like that, right? I didn't study mechanical engineering or electrical engineering, which is much more specific. I took industrial engineering, production engineering, which is you touch a little bit of physics, you touch a little bit of chemistry, you touch all those kind of things, but you don't actually dig into one specific thing, maybe related to techno-economic analysis and all those kind of things, but it's really about optionality, really about learning, and really about, the context. That's one of the best option I had at the time. Then with consulting, something similar, right? You graduate, you want to go where, the best people, you think the best people are going, at least in my country, and you want to keep options open. You want to understand, okay, I want to be involved in the healthcare industry. I want to get to know how business models are in the consumer side. So it was also related to that learning component, to the context component. Then the big jump came to the US, and that's, I think, something pretty special. Even though I was incentivized what was happening with my home country, that just to give you context, we lost maybe 80% of our total GDP in 10 years. So it was maybe forced a little bit by that, but what I found extremely compelling by the US is the culture, which is, I think we discussed this in the past, in our past conversation, like, some weird things. The US people love losers, right? People love people who tried, who risk everything, that try again, that kind of underdog mentality. That's something pretty particular, in my opinion, versus the rest of the world. And I think that, the fact that that type of culture, the type of people that were coming to this country are in this country, and the optionality was, for me, a clear decision to move to the US and, do my MBA. And during the MBA, it was also similar things, right? I really like kind of the learning experience, and how you can, similar to engineering, how you can translate reality into models, and then models to reality, and how to be able to predict a specific situation to happen, and how to understand what assumptions was moving that situation. So, finance was a great match. Like from engineering to finance, for me, was a very, very simple match. And that's why I joined JPMorgan, and I continue to be involved on the finance side and consulting side. So yeah, I would say those are kind of the main aspects. A lot of optionality. I want to be involved in several different things. I think that develops your own kind of cognitive diversity, being able to think, from a different perspective, different industries, different business models. That adds a lot. And the learning component, right? Being with the best people you can. And that's why I'm here. Like, that's why in this trend where you have much smarter people than I am, and being able to, share with them ideas and learn a lot from them.
The title general partner is incredibly fitting, and I really appreciate what you said around optionality and learning and working with the best people. Those are more than many people might often acknowledge or admit, motivators that I think drive some of the most exciting and impactful careers. So I'm excited to see, Francisco, what you keep doing next, because starting with where you are and continuing to build on where you're going, you're going to be doing some great things.
Hopefully, yeah. Let's cross our fingers.
So,
Yeah.
from your time in finance at JPM, in 2020, you helped join and co-found the Humboldt Fund, and so you had we're talking about learning, we're talking about working with the best people, and it's clear you had a strong connection with your co-founders. But by the same token, what led you to choose starting your own firm as opposed to maybe joining an existing firm? And in that launch, what did you want Humboldt to be known for?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think maybe 2-3 reasons on why starting something completely new. The first reason is it was out of my control and is all related with Benjamin. So back in I don't remember, it was 2017, I believe, or 2018. His family, and he was quite involved in that transaction, sold one big business to a Chinese group in Latin America. Okay, and that business was sold. One of the reasons, and it's related to the agriculture side. I cannot share a lot of information, but it was related to agriculture, aquaculture, in those kind of fields. They sold because of they reach at that point kind of the most efficient way to produce that output. So they created an output. You know, they had the technology to create this output at the best possible price, but they reach some sort of max technology development. Like it would be very difficult to keep moving forward. So they said, look, there's not much more upside in terms of efficiency. Let's sell a business. But they were clear that most of those efficiencies were driven by like electrical engineering, mechanical engineering, software engineering, but they were not touching on the biology side. They were like assuming the biology is outside of the equation, which is just nuts, given that it's the most important component, right? Yeah. So they figured this out pretty early. They said, look, we're not touching this vertical. How do we, learn a little bit more about this? Let's sell the business, but learn a little bit more about this. And that was a big component, right? Because at that point, Benjamin started to think, hey, how we can leverage biology. And we started to dig deep into the research on the research side across, and we compared with other trends, but it was by far the most compelling investment trend. You had, a brand new kind of field, open up field. You had a clear cost advantage, like not only from a dollar's perspective, but also much better use of resources, efficient resources. You had a network, maybe a network effect component in that, you can leverage data to improve the process, and the process gets better little by little, and huge optionality. It's not only related to agriculture, aquaculture. This is like, pharma. This is even energy. So you were able to touch with this kind of quote unquote bio revolution. You can really touch almost every single aspect of the economy. And so that was for me, that was a big component for me to join, and also to be supportive of this trend, because we were looking at other, like we as I tell you before, we checked different trends, and this by far was the most interesting one. And the final component, I think, which is related to timing, even though I'm not a believer in timing, like investing and just focus on timing side, but it was, you have one, which is very, very relevant. You had, it was much easier to create a company. Easier by that, I don't mean hard or difficult in terms of probability of success. I'm talking about capital required and people required to bring a concept to the market. So that was still going up drastically, especially on the biotech side. FDA open to innovation. You get these amazing advancements in terms of machine learning, artificial intelligence, in terms of processing data, getting data. And it was not that like getting so much into the biology side versus other sectors. So you had these background effects going on that make you think, look, this is what Charlie Munger calls a Lollapalooza effect, where it's basically when you're investing in a trend, and you see that there are different components working in tandem that makes the projection non-linear, more exponential. Those were, that thing, when I started to research data, I realized, oh, this is a Lollapalooza effect on top of all this, underlying trends. So I think, that's why we decided, let's do it ourselves. Like we have the talent, it's a very big trend. A lot of people will be participating, but again, it's not large enough, so we'll be fine. So I think that's on my side. That's how we decided to do it ourselves. And then the other component on, I think you had another question, right?
Yes, and forgive me, I realized that's it was two questions in one. Forgive me, I got excited. I was just curious, when you launched, what did you want Humboldt to be known for? How did you want the firm to stand out?
Definitely. We thought, given our backgrounds, we really wanted to focus on the support side. By support, I mean support with entrepreneurs and people with a clear technology and with the right resources to get to the next level. So it was not only about helping them from a scientific perspective, which is basically, okay, how we can use other technologies to support yours, or how we can get you in get you in front of the right people from an academic perspective, but also from the business and commercial side, which is basically, look, we understand you have an amazing background, you have a PhD from an amazing academic institution, but is how we can help you make better commercial decisions. So if you have a platform technology, okay, is it better to partner with Pfizer, Merck, all these big guys? Is it better to go to not commercialize the platform right now? Is it better to split it, have a couple of B2B deals, have a couple of this? How to even negotiate a term sheet, right? That they have none experience in transactions. So those are the things that we wanted to bring to this. And these guys are like entrepreneurs, you know this better than I do, like IQ levels through the roof. So I had to spend a lot of money, more than 200K, and you know this also. And these guys, you can sit down with them in a couple of weeks and they might be up to speed to negotiate these transactions. So it's not a matter of they will learn it or not, they will. It's just share that with them. Look, these are the frameworks that you should be using, or this is how I think you should be thinking about to deal with this commercial aspect of your business. So that's something that, at least from my end, maybe you have different answers from Benjamin and Sebastian, but that for me was I really want to achieve, always being the most supportive investor, or at least one of the most supportive investors in the cap table.
I really like that, and I suspect your portfolio companies appreciate it as well, because as you say, technologists are brilliant. As investors, it's doubtful we'll ever be able to understand their technologies as well as they do. But where we can provide a little bit of assistance is around those frameworks, is around that support, is around understanding the investor ecosystem and maybe thinking about how do they frame their story, how do they provide a bit of business model ingenuity, and then on top of all that, how do we also give them a little bit of guidance based on what we've seen from the industry knowledge and the expertise we've gained. So that's a great message to go into VC recognizing and really wanting to dive into your strengths and support your founders. I like it. So
yeah. Much more eloquent, man. That was extremely eloquent. Yeah.
Thank you. And no, I would say yours is very earnest, and that's something I appreciate, because as we talk through this, I mean, I'm asking you to share your story, and I have the privilege of listening in. And so summarizing is always easier than providing the initial wisdom. And while we're on the topic, do you have any advice for individuals who might be considering launching their own venture firms?
Wow, that's so I might not be the most qualified person in that. This is Humboldt is the only firm from a biotech perspective that I launch. But I can share with you a couple of things that I believe are important from the point of view of, first, like main stakeholders, right? Entrepreneurs and investors. I would say first is from a team perspective, and you mentioned, you highlighted that also before, having a diverse team. I don't know, a diverse, and we can get deep into kind of the diversity kind of component, but a diverse team from a cognitive perspective. I think something that is quite compelling, especially in a field like bio, where you have convergence of different people coming together to solve a big problem, is also having the same background in your own firm to understand, to assess the investment and also then support entrepreneurs. So having people from science, having people with experience on clinical trials, venture capital, traditional venture capital, even psychology majors, that could be extremely compelling when assessing an investment. And it's happening to us, and we don't have that level of diversity. Again, my background, Benjamin's background, Sebastian's background, but it's very refreshing to hear another person's perspective when they have a completely different background from you, like completely different. So I think having a diverse team can add a lot of value. Also, not only from a return perspective, but also for the entrepreneurs. It's make it much more fun. So that's one, the team component, being able to find the right people. The other thing is we discussed that, so that's simple, like the underlying trend, this compounding effect, being able to find trends where you can clearly discern that this is not a linear kind of investment. This is more exponential. And we already touched on that one. And I would say the last thing is about investing versus science. And you particularly have interesting background, right? Because you have an MBA from one of the best schools in the nation, in the world. But it's very different to be an investor than just to be a due diligence person or a scientist evaluating a company. Two different things, two different scales, two different skill sets. And by that I mean, the typical thing is that traditional scientists, they can tell you, look, this is a very cool science. If it works, amazing. And it can be great, but the thing about investing is not investing in cool stuff, but it's investing in cool stuff, but at the right price. It's about the difference between value and price. And that's different, right? Because you will have to actually do the job. Like, okay, if this is a good science, okay, how much it will cost you to get to that success? What type of deals you can do before getting there? How much capital do you need? Like, how many people? What type of people? And those are things that you can actually have to, at one point, put on paper and have a decent understanding of what's really driving that value. And that's investing. That's not really a lot about science. It's about investing. So I think having at least one guy or a couple of people in that team that will be able to assess that from an investing perspective, not only science perspective, would be quite compelling. But again, just take this as a grain of salt, as this, Humboldt is the only and my first biotech firm. So just keep that in mind.
Still strong advice. And I would agree with you. I think as you consider investments, especially in the very early stages, where ALIX, similar to Humboldt, is pre-seed through seed, occasionally Series A, the way we think about things is not only investing in the right science, but at the right price and backing the right people at the right time. And so when you think about the market conditions, and when you think about what the cost might be to bring something to market, it can be the coolest science in the world, but if it's going to be, if the unit economics aren't going to work out, we have to find a way to help them get there. And so very, very much with you. And as we talk about this a little bit further, and as we dive deeper into Humboldt's portfolio, as you've said, Humboldt stands behind early stage companies that synthesize engineering with physical and life sciences to create technologies that disrupt global convention to solve critical issues of our time. So like you were saying earlier, generating learning, turning that into knowledge, and going from knowledge to action, ideally quickly. So can you tell us a little bit more about this mission around creating technologies to disrupt global conventions? I would be very curious what that means to you.
Yeah, that's a complex choice of words for 3 Latin Americans. So I will try to do my best. Look, I think two things stand out. Two things that stand out, right? So the challenges component and the convergence component. So on the challenges side, I think it's very difficult to predict these short-term changes in the future. I think it really depends on specific industries and opportunities where going the long term might be a little bit easier, and then you will have to work out the timing component. But my challenges is, look, we will have, and we are having a climate crisis. We will have to cure diseases. We have a significant percentage of our population becoming older and older, which means more disease. So we know that those are going to be big problems. And that's something that if you see maybe outside biotech or other fields, you don't have those clear challenges to solve. And here you have them, are very clear. I don't know if that's going to be, exacerbated, maybe the climate component in the next, couple of months, maybe in the next couple of years, decades, but it will happen. So we want to make sure that every time that we pick or we decide to invest in a company and support a company and put all this effort, we want to make sure that they are going after a big challenge. Mm-hmm. Okay. And at the end of the day, from an LP perspective, if you think about it, if you're going after big challenges, that means big economic rewards. If you make economic rewards, that will attract the right talent. So at the end of the day, the whole thing goes into the same direction. Like everyone will be benefiting from that. So that's one component of the challenge. On the convergence side, this is something we discuss also, and it's related to the diversity side. If you bring different technologies, different background people to the table to solve a problem, you might have a better chance of getting solved, especially when it's very complex. And I think there are a couple of papers and books about it. There was an MIT paper, I think it was like 2010, that talked about the third revolution. When they make the case that in order to solve big problems, you need to get rid of this science kind of silos, like people from chemistry not talking with people from finance, and from finance not talking with people from physics, and those kind of things. And even there's one institute here in the US called Santa Fe Institute, where they are not they're an academic degree conferring institution, which means that you cannot study there. They don't offer programs, but they just mix people around. They get investors. I know a couple of investors that went to some of those sessions, and they mix those guys with MIT PhDs. They mix those guys with biotech executives. So they mix all these people and they try to come up with solutions to big challenges, from climate change. And that only happens, and kind of the success of this institution is that they bring so interesting, creative ideas to solve challenges. And it's mainly because of the background of the people participating. So that convergency component we also like to see. We have several examples. I think you perfectly know Celino, where you have physicists working with MBAs, working with engineers, and those, I think that might be the only way to shuffle things around to solve big issues. So those are the two things that we want to support, we want to be known for. Hopefully those are kind of the 2 points that I'm thinking about when I hear that phrase, and how we think about investing and how we think Humboldt should be.
That's something that really resonates with myself, and I think the rest of the audience. And you're right, we're seeing more and more convergence, especially around technology and biology, but not necessarily around maybe more traditional disciplines, where if there was a creative mindset and that connection, maybe we would be seeing more creative and impactful solutions being developed sooner. So I really love that mission, and I love how it gets back to building the right teams and making sure they're collaborating together to solve big challenges. And talking about a few of those big challenges, you shared some of your investment theses in the biospace before around gene editing, biomanufacturing, iPSCs, and microbiome companies. I'd be curious, I guess, what led you to select those 4 areas? And do you think there's going to be an expansion on what areas you might invest in the future?
Yes. Look, I think maybe 2 points. So the first kind of criteria is related to the science. So is this technology something that might work? Is this something that was tried in the past? Who tried? Why they failed? is there third-party research on this approach that we can check? What other technological developments are supporting this specific platform technology? And that's something that we of course rely a lot, not only on Sebastian, but also all the collaborators that we have across the US, is really understanding how the feasibility of this potential trends, right? And I think the ones that I share with you are the ones that we felt are, they mark all the checks. The second component, and it's always coming back to the same science versus business, is okay, is this investable? Like, okay, this is cool. They might be able to make it happen. Like, they're doing things differently. You have these Lollapalooza effects, all that stuff. But is this something that can actually make money? And I know it's very early, and generally, it's going to be very early, but have just a superficial understanding. For example, if you're creating this new novel way of cell therapies, okay, do we have a techno-economic analysis to support the cost levels you need to achieve for patients to attract, to get a significant number of patients and get to the market quickly? How much it will cost? Like, do you think we will need, $2 billion? We'll need $20 million, and then we can start that way and then move. Like how we can think more about that. And the other thing is risk and uncertainty, and the difference between those, right? Risk is all about, the distribution of returns, where you will be, standing. Uncertainty is I have no idea of the underlying distribution of those returns or that specific view. So it's going from uncertainty to risk, and that requires, sitting down and understand and getting to the experts. So, and that's the second big component that we use to get to these levels. And if you look at it, like those four trends, you can make the case on both sides, on the scientific side and on the investment side, that are compelling strategies. I don't want to say, and nobody can tell you, look, it's going to be successful 100%. Maybe not. Yeah. But it has to go through those two kind of metrics, if you can say, to be able to support it.
That makes a lot of sense. No, especially and I'd like to, you've touched on this a bit, I'd love to dive in to get your thoughts maybe a little bit more deeply. We've talked about investing for what we might call planetary health, using bio-driven innovation around things like biomanufacturing, sustainability, and really, we don't know the timelines, but it's important to start today. And the argument I think could be made that we've only begun to see serious investment from traditional bio investors into that space. So I guess I would love to understand more around how you think of investing in what we might call sustainable planetary health, and where you see the field going next.
Yes. Look, I'm not an expert on this. These are just views based on what I have seen and how excited I am. Look, I think it's
I wouldn't be asking if I wasn't also. So
this is something quite compelling. Again, both. It's not part right now of our investment thesis or those four verticals, but definitely, I think it's going to be at one point, given the type of companies we have in the portfolio. Like, we have companies already thinking about exactly what you mentioned, how to use their biology-driven platforms for this, what you call planetary health. My view, and this is again personal, it's I think you can, if we start with the premise that biology, and I don't know who said this at one point, but it's quite compelling. Biology is the most powerful force to allocate matter much more efficiently. Okay. If that's kind of the premise, then you can definitely move around molecules and atoms to make Earth a better place to live from an air perspective, like quality of life, climate, all these kind of things. And I think the next stage, which I think is quite compelling, and I would love to hear your opinion, is on outside Earth. Like, if you're able to control the physical world, you can go to another planet and being able to develop a very similar ecosystem that you have on Earth in that planet, just by understanding how are atmospheric kind of conditions, what type of air do they have, what's the amount of oxygen, and based on those kind of metrics, you can create an environment based on these microorganisms to be able for the human to be able to live there. So it's if you really control the physical world, that's it. Like you won. Again, I'm being extremely maybe not responsible, but I think long idealistic also. Like I think long term, that's kind of the future, like what you're describing. And you can move to other planets. You can move to
I think it's going to be exciting to see eventually. I think, as you're pointing out, by the same token, we should make sure we can sustain ourselves here until we can get there.
100%.
And so that's where we have to continue investing in today as well as the future. And so that future is on different time horizons. But let's build on all of that. We've talked a lot about, at this point, yourself, your background, your portfolio a bit. Let's talk about how companies get into the portfolio. You and your team have made incredible investments into companies such as Endpoint Health and ANSA Biotechnologies on the biopharma side, and in companies like Meetable and Notco on the food tech sustainability side. Maybe we can use one or two of these companies as examples, but we'd love to understand more about how you separate the signal from the noise when evaluating companies.
Good. Yeah. So we have, given the different backgrounds we have, and touching back again on the team side, each of us, we have maybe different ways of deciding whether to do or not to do an investment, which is the beauty of being in this amazing team. I would say, from my perspective, I would focus on 4 or 5 things initially, especially if we're talking about a more platform-oriented company where you have a lot of optionality, not only on the application side, but also on the business side. And that's first of all, what traditional everybody sees, how large the market will be. And not only that, the optionality. By optionality, I mean, how easy or what are the marginal costs for you to move to other applications or their industries. So if you're developing a gene editing system, can you actually do the same not only in pharma, but outside pharma? And how much it will cost you, and how your improvements and learnings with the current application of your platform, can you move and use it, leverage it to move to another industry? So that's one big one. The second one is a point you touched in the past, which is, okay, is there real value to the current user? Or a lot of people in finance, you say value spread, which is basically the difference between how much I can put a product in the market versus the value or the willingness to pay of that specific consumer. And we can translate that, of course, to the pharma side with other metrics, but that's kind of the idea. Can in the best case scenario, do we think they will have, I don't know, the COGS, or they will have the ICR ratio? ICR, I mean the incremental cost of that drug versus the quality, the extra life years that you can add to this patient. If everything goes well, can we get to 2 times, 3 times, 4 times better outcomes from a quality perspective, cost perspective? And that's where we, support ourselves with, outside advisors, and where we get deep into the diligence side. I think, again, I forgot the examples, but the examples on the first one related to the market size is ANSA, right? Hey, they can get into several different markets. On this one, value spread, I think Endpoint, which I believe you guys are also investors, is amazing, right? Because these guys, they can show you, even with current data, they can show you how with their platform, a phase 1 or phase 2 asset, just using their platform and being able to understand what type of patients they're getting in the clinic, how with their platform, you can increase the net present value of that specific asset twice, double or triple. So that kind of approach of being able to get to that specific value, that's quite compelling. I think Endpoint have been doing an amazing job. Then I would say resource requirement is I think the third one, like how much it will cost you to get there. Okay, you can get to this value spread. You will have you will be able to compete against strong pharma companies in one case, or consumer companies. You have IP, blah blah blah. how much it will cost you to get there at the right time. So one example for that one is maybe Meetable that closed a big, significant, and this is public information, partnership with DSM. So they have a good partnership with that world leader, and on top of that, you have a clear path to cost reduction. So through techno-economic analysis and all those kind of things, we were able to see, look, we think we're fairly confident that they will need, they will need like $2 billion or $1 billion to get to what they need to be to be a good investment. That's another thing. Resource, how much resources they will need to get there. And finally, the team. And we go back again to all these things we discussed in the previous part of the interview, which is, look, multidisciplinary is always a winner. Look at Endpoint again. Jason, Diego, compare Jason and Diego. They're completely different guys. From, one is from Latam, the other one is American, one is an MBA, the other one is a PhD, like exactly what you want to see in a business like this. So I think, those are, I believe I mentioned like 4 factors that I would try to understand in a little bit more rigorous way that I describe, of course, but those are kind of the 4 factors that I personally try to focus on when I'm checking like this platform. On the therapeutic side, it's a little bit different. It's all about risks and reducing risk as much as possible. So, okay, is the target related to the disease? Is the hit that you picked really gets into the target? Do you have delivery issues? Do you have off-target effects? All that stuff. Then commercialization risk, which is related to speed, how many competitors, standard of care, IP, and then manufacturing risk. Can we actually do this molecule in this amount? So it's a little bit different. I think you need to adjust, but those are kind of the 2 main frameworks, if you can say. Sorry to speak this consulting kind of language, but that's how I tend to approach it. That's only me. Again, that's the beauty. I bring this, and then Benjamin and Sebastian, complement much better in different ways.
And I think having those complementary perspectives is helpful in going through those assessments. But those are many of the pillars I would be looking at, and we do look at when assessing companies. So in your diligence process, then, do you take and assess companies together as a team, and then all come together to form an opinion? Is there a lead partner who takes in a more active role with specific companies? I guess I'm just curious from a diligence perspective, a little bit about what the process is like, so that any founders listening to the call can have an inside peek.
Yes, look, we work pretty well in teams, so there's definitely we all are involved in the decision-making process, which makes it more compelling. Specifically in terms of the process, of course, Sebastian will be leading the scientific component. We will definitely bring people that are experts in the field. So if we're checking, for example, an iPSC technology company, definitely Sebastian will be involved. We will all be involved at one point, but we will bring someone who has the experience in this particular field. We think these people will be in a much better position. These people have been working on specific technologies for the past 10, 15, 20 years, their whole career. So as you said before, the information asymmetry is large. We need to reduce that and being able to understand what's happening. So, and the process for us is maybe a little bit different. We don't make decisions in 4 months, 3 months after 25 different calls. We generally, in 6 to 7 different calls max, a couple of science calls, a couple of business calls, 1 general call, we will be able to have enough information plus whatever information entrepreneurs share in the data room. And with that, we should be in a very good position to move forward. But we generally focus again in those aclaratory meetings, if you can say, is the edge that they have, and how they, and the edge is there are different frameworks to use, but I like one which is based on 4 factors. Is the first one is informational, like what information do you have that nobody else has right now? That's one that it happens a lot on the academic field, quite compelling. The second one is analytical, like how can you better analyze this technology? How we can better, we personally, I think Humboldt will be able to analyze this better than anyone else. And then the structural side, which is, can we help these entrepreneurs in a different way than any other investor? So we also, again, investing, as you know, is not only about risk and return, it's also about correlation, the third component, which is how this will perform together with the rest of the companies in the portfolio.
Yep.
And that's one component that we also try to bring in the whole thing, and try to understand how this technology can help us out with other maybe companies in the portfolio. And that's very, again, this is a superficial kind of take. Generally, we have tools to be able, like, some people laugh about it, but sometimes I personally create like this adjusted net present value models, really go through the numbers, forcing myself and my team to go and to try to get the bias outside. I try to avoid biases, because at the end of the day, always, your bias, as you meet an entrepreneur, maybe it's not intentional, they show you what excites you, and then you forget about specific metrics that you should have checked. So using a little bit more, again, traditional consulting dark side kind of process, you avoid those biases, and that gives you, again, another behavioral kind of edge, right? Not just focus on what they're sharing with you, but focus on exactly what you need in order to make this company a good investment.
All makes a lot of sense in that case then. No, it does. And I would say, if you're thinking about it from the lens of the founder's perspective in that case, do you have any key recommendations for founders who might be reaching out to Humboldt, who might want to get started on this process?
Yeah, look, no specific recommendation. And, what I think is that most of the companies that we invested in came from pretty weird sources, like from companies that were built out of ideas in a boardroom, to cold reach outs, to conversations we had with professors at different schools. So there's not really a clear process. Things that will help definitely is, again, going back again to the edge. Like, okay, do you have information nobody else has? You discover something nobody else have no idea how much this can increase the efficiency of this particular engineering process. You have a behavioral edge, you have a structural edge, you have an analytical edge. Like, those, having a clear edge and being able to share it pretty in a very summarized way is important. The other thing that can help is the traditional stuff, right? A clear IP pathway, a predefined team where you can show that you guys have been working in the past together. Warm intros also help a lot. If this comes from a investor like yourselves, we definitely will take a deeper look. And aggressive vision, that's also we want to see. Like, we want to avoid investing in people where they trust in the technology, but they doubt about the potential. So that's something that we will love to see. But in terms of reaching out, again, we're quite open. Like, you can go any way. Definitely warm intros will help.
All right. Well, then let's pivot slightly. No, cold intros, warm intros, all are routes that I think an enterprising founder should take. And I think, as you're saying, there's no one source of connection to an entrepreneur. And so being open to all of them, but also making sure and advising the entrepreneur to do their homework first, think about what their advantage is and how they can convey it in a clear story is important. And that's something that we as investors often give feedback on when having first conversations. And so as we think about that feedback, and as we think more broadly about supporting founders, you said in the beginning, one of your goals in launching Humboldt was that you really wanted to be supportive and help founders get to the next level. And so when we think about investing and supporting portfolio companies, especially on maybe more of the sustainability symbio side of biotech, and we've talked about this briefly before, there can sometimes be a need for companies to possess both scientific skill sets to build out their technology, and then also the sort of commercial and marketing skill sets, especially for companies that might be more direct to consumer, or they're selling something B2B on a faster sales cycle than your standard partnership deal with a pharmaceutical company. And so recognizing that there's no one size fits all, that there are a number of different business models nowadays, I'd just be curious to your thoughts on how do you support being an investor in so many interdisciplinary teams and across so many different domains? How do you think about supporting those teams at Humboldt?
Good question. Look, from a science perspective, I think I already shared how we generally try to approach it. As I said before, Sebastian has a quite compelling network in different academic institutions to try to find maybe complementary technologies to what some of our companies are building. That's one big component, like, for example, delivery technologies for CRISPR systems, or a novel manufacturing process for a specific tRNA, or those kind of things. That's quite compelling. Now on the strategy side, finance side, what we try to do is and this is one important thing, is when we invest in the company, we invest of course in the team, and by that we mean we trust them 100%. So the premise is that they have the skills to learn anything, and we will support their decisions. We can agree, disagree. Generally, we will provide them with all the information to make a better decision. That's what we were here to provide, to advise them. But again, at the end of the day, they control the company. We invested in them. That's why, we're kind of, from that perspective, hands off. We're not an investor that will be complaining and everything, but so in that case, exactly.
Not very fun when an investor does that.
So what we do is we provide information. But how do we provide information? Okay, so if you're engaging with, you're thinking about what you described before, business model, like let's partner with this or this company. Okay, how we can help them make a better decision? Well, you need comps. What are the past 20, 30, 40 different BD deals this firm has done in the past? What were the economics of those? Again, this is public information most of the time. So we go and we try to find those things, and we have different platforms. We use the traditional pitch book, farm intelligence, all these kind of things, but we provide them with the data. Instead of saying, no, look, well, Merck, they tend to do this. No. This is how they have done it in the past. Are the indications they're going after. This is the upfront payment they generally provide. So get deep into not making the decision, doing the decision. That's the entrepreneur's, of course, job, is how we can find the data to inform that decision. So it has to do with deal comps. That was one example that we made. If we need to connect you with a high-level executive that retire in Procter & Gamble because you want to get a specific product in some stores, in 500 different stores in the US, okay, speak with that guy. He might have better information. If you're thinking about, for example, I don't know, we want to go with this disease indication versus that disease indication. Okay, let's try to build an adjusted net present value model. Let's see if we have the data to make a decision. Do we, epi data, POS data, time in the clinic, all these kind of things that will allow you to do a better decision. So again, we're not saying you should do this, that, blah. It's more about, okay, what data do you need to get to this, to make a better decision? So that's where we put a lot of emphasis. We have developed frameworks, all these kind of things. But it's really about supporting. It's not about making the decision.
That makes sense.
And even one last thing pretty quickly is we get all the way. Like, it's not only about commercial. It's not only about strategy. Like, even organizing, like corporate structure. Like, if you think a bridge bio model is much more attractive than a traditional pharma model where you have different companies, and what are the repercussions to the people, right? Because if how it could be even more beneficial. Those kind of things we discuss, but also the real estate side. My back experience in real estate, so we can also help you with that, those lease negotiations, areas, brokers, those kind of things. We really want to be all in from that perspective.
Taking this then in a slightly different direction, talking about being all in, a point, and rightly today, of particular focus and importance is around diversity, equity, and inclusion of founders, boards, teams. And so given, and I hope you don't mind me calling it out, your background as an immigrant, and the fact that you see and support these companies from the earliest stages, trying to make sure they have as much information as possible. Do you have any ideas or thoughts as how we as VCs can provide support to founders seeking to better keep in mind team building, especially when backing people of immigrant and first-generation backgrounds?
Would also love your take on this one, Chris. Look, it's a very tough question. So I will provide some sort of background and just not well-structured thoughts, because again, I'm also not a specialist in this.
Mhm.
So one thing that I would say, just to be optimistic a little bit, is US culture. And this is referring to one of the initial points that I said before, is, I really love how the US is pro-risk, pro, going all in, and being able to accept losers if they really try hard and they really work for it. I remember a story at JPMorgan where a guy told me, look, if you pay taxes and you make us money, you're an American. So that kind of simplicity, that kind of, look, if you do your thing and you just move forward, is great. So I think that's a culture that you might not be able to find anywhere else, and that's just a reason to be optimistic. That's my personal perspective. Now, in terms of diversity, I think going back to the point of teams, not only on the venture capital side but also on the company side, there are clear studies that show how performance is positively affected by a diverse team. So it's not something that is just cool to have it and people are just saying it. No, there's data backing it up. Now, it's very important that it's not any data. I think McKinsey and a couple of consultant firms have done this, but they don't adjust for specific metrics. However, I saw a couple of studies. One of them is called "What Difference Make a Difference," where they go and they divide diversity in different buckets. It's not about whether you are from certain race, sex, age. Is that's kind of the social diversity, and then there's a cognitive diversity, which is where do you go to school, like education level, skill set that you have, where did you work before. And the real outperformer was related to the cognitive diversity. Okay. Now there's high correlation between social and cognitive diversity in that, if you came from a specific background with a specific age, sex, race, you might, be focused on a specific career path, which affects your cognitive diversity. But what I want to say with this is that there are studies showing actual outperformance if you are able to make a more diverse team, a board team, a VC team, whatever. And I have found in the past that, especially with these biotech consumer companies, you look around in some boards and, very few people have experience in, consumer products. And that's concerning, right? At some point. So those are things that we need to be aware of, how to bring that diversity, because it's helping everybody. It's helping the actual people you're hiring, you're getting involved. It's helping investors with returns. It's helping entrepreneurs to make better decisions, life easier. So, but I think we need a little bit, we need to show more data. We need to, because again, entrepreneurs, they're data driven. Investors, they're data driven. So we need to show this more. We need to have better studies showing data that this is really a better way to improve the whole ecosystem. And one last thing that I would say is biotech. Even though I said social versus cognitive diversity, biotech is quite not diverse. When I was, my first experience was at MIT, right? Very diverse, people, all that stuff. And then I went to JPMorgan. I thought, wow, there's not a lot of different people here. And then I went to real estate, even worse. And then I went to biotech, and it's even worse. So the thing is that I think there's a huge inefficiency that we can change just by hiring the right people and putting in place the right incentives and people to realize how this can help everybody. But it's difficult. I know that it's structurally, that's why I'm saying I'm not an expert. I'm not proposing a specific plan, but it's something that can help everybody in the industry.
And I think it's something where it's clear you've given it some thought. And I also think it's entertaining that you said you weren't an expert when you pulled out a significant number of studies and statistics. It's clear that this is an area you think a lot about, and that's really encouraging because it's one not enough thought goes into at the earliest stages. Too many people focus on how do we make sure the company even has a chance of success, and don't get me wrong, that's incredibly important, but thinking about and recognizing that a lot of founders bring together individuals, and you talked about this in pharma, where I agree, or biotech broadly, where I agree it's prevalent. If you have two co-founding PhDs who seek to only bring on other PhDs because that's a
Yeah.
cognitive similarity they're familiar and comfortable with, that's not going to be the most representative company that thinks
Mhm.
about. And going back to your point earlier, Endpoint has two great founders who are a PhD and an MBA who complement each other incredibly well. And I'm not saying
Mhm.
that's the archetype, that the only archetype that works by any means, or that you have to have multiple founders or any of the above. Just that it is important to have those different perspectives in the room. And so, based on your answer there, I'm excited for this next question, and I'm going to intentionally keep it a little bit open-ended. But we've talked about this a bit in the past, and we've talked about what's coming next, and even in this conversation, in terms of innovation and startup business models and how to think about team building. But given you're coming from a deep financial background, I'd love your thoughts on whether there are ways we can develop or improve venture models. Basically, in your opinion, what's coming next for venture, and maybe how do we help it get there?
Yeah. We had a long discussion on this one when we met, which I found quite compelling. Look, my view, and this is coming from a VC, right? This is extremely inefficient. I think that the current venture model, especially for the type of companies we're funding, and again, this is just, it's not a conclusion. It's just based on observational data. And why I think it is extremely inefficient. We're funding companies with low probabilities of success. They will require a huge amount of capital, and the exits are going to happen in the long term. And there's research showing that, you know, the type of venture capital funding is not, you know, the best to fund in this from two perspectives, right? Returns to investors, one, and second one, from the point of view of you know, funding a much larger amount of companies. So, you know, as a whole, society will benefit if we fund more. However, this, you know, has been the same way for forever, right? So it's something difficult to think what would be the best approach. What I haven't seen, again, in reading a lot, because I really like the topic, given my finance background, as you said, is what some people or thought leaders are suggesting or are thinking about, which is being able to mix this, not, I wouldn't say crowdsourcing, but some sort of a different financial structure where you will be able to fund many more projects and being able to attach those projects with the right research or right developers, drug developers. With that, I'm saying, look, let's get a much larger pool of capital. That larger pool of capital you structure in a way so you can attract not only equity investors, but also debt investors, okay, credit investors.
Mm-hmm.
You do that by structuring returns a little bit different. Some returns will have, you know, will be much larger, much risk, more return, but you will also have credit investors. And that means that your total addressable market for funding biotech will be much larger because you will be bringing a new class of investors that otherwise they wouldn't be that committed. So I think, you know, those kind of, venture funding models that are suggested with people like professors like Andrew Law from MIT might be, you know, a little bit more interesting. Again, Andrew Law is not suggesting this specific method, but what I'm trying to say is that, you know, it's extremely inefficient, and everyone agrees with that. It's very, you know, it's difficult to scale. So we need to find ways, maybe for specific disease indications, maybe for disease areas, maybe for areas where returns are not that attractive. I don't know, if you go to some specific diseases in neurology, it might make more sense for the government to be a little bit more involved than the traditional capital markets, given how the cost of society is much larger than, you know, the returns that you will be able to have on the other side. So I think that's something that I agree with you. There has to be a different way of getting capital to these companies. There might be much efficient ways, and I believe in the future that's going to happen. And I think I will make two examples. One is you guys, right, with this BIOS community. You will be able to, you know, you're sharing ideas, you're finding a way to attract talent on the investing side, on the venture side, on the entrepreneurial side, like academic side. You will have all this data, and then you will be maybe in a better position to allocate capital than a traditional fund that is just focused on the specific disease indications they're focused on the specific returns profiles. So you will have this type of platforms will have a much better outcomes, not only for patients but also for you guys. So those are kind of the my overall thinking on how this field needs to change and will change in the future.
Oh, it's something I think that companies are starting to come up today even. And you were talking about disease areas, for example, that might be better funded from other sources. And so, as you say, this is very early, but there's a lot of talk, and I'd be curious your thoughts on this, especially given how nascent it is. Things like Web3 might enable access and almost the crowdsourcing of investment for companies, for example, in the rare disease space, where patients can take even more active ownership instead of just advocacy for their care around the development of technologies or the spin out and support of technologies that might not otherwise be as commercially attractive for larger companies. And so I think there's definitely a lot of interest in this, and very flattered that you view BIOS so highly. That's something I certainly hope the transparency of the platform enables this across the board, not just for Alix. But maybe a few rapid fire questions as we come to a close, just to cap things off. I guess the first would be, do you have any advice for those earlier in their careers seeking to pursue entrepreneurship? Especially maybe those outside the US.
Definitely, I think this can be a little bit controversial. I would say the US might be the best place to make it happen in terms of the whole ecosystem, for sure. And also the other thing is have a clear definition of your edge, going back again to what information you have, how your analysis is different, and how you think about stuff, your behavioral edge. So those would be kind of the two main points pretty quickly that I would focus on.
Good points both. And we've talked a lot about the professional, we've talked a lot about Humboldt and yourself, but let's make it a little bit personal. Give the audience a chance to get to know you a little bit. How do you like to spend your free time?
Yeah, so family time. We were discussing before, I have two kids, 4 and 7. I live in Vermont, and we have so many different activities in the winter, skiing, in the summer, tennis and golf. I really like a lot of sports. And the second thing is about learning. I really like to sit down and read it. Not a specific good books. I really like to learn stuff, especially on the finance, continue to be on the finance side, biology side. That's something that I really like spending time on. So those two things are things I do a lot.
I'm definitely going to have to reach out and get some book recommendations. I'm always looking for good recommendations. Well, at this point, any other closing thoughts or shameless plugs, anything you'd like to share with the audience?
Oh no, I'm just, we're very lucky to be, first in this country, second to be working in this long-term trend that is helping. It's going to help a lot of patients. It's going to create a lot of returns, a lot of value worldwide. So always happy to be working with in this ecosystem with people like you, with entrepreneurs, smart, all that stuff. So yeah, hopefully this will continue.
It's a great note to end on, Francisco. Thank you so much for your time and for an absolutely fantastic episode here on BIOS Ventures. Thank you again.
Thank you. Bye-bye.